Australia. From Toowoomba to Fremantle, our land abounds in nature's gifts and predatory cults of every kind. In history's page, colonials killed the locals and oppressed the lower class with a heavy hand. Today, this legacy of domination advances in this great southern land. I recently told an acquaintance that I'd lost my daughter to a destructive cult, and they responded by saying they didn't know there were any cults in Australia. Another woman who was present responded by gasping and then proceeded to talk about all the abuse she had experienced as a child in the Jehovah's Witness community. Australia, land of the free, a place where we turn a blind eye to religious abuse. Hi, I'm Renee. I'm a teacher and a mental health practitioner, and I'm passionate about raising awareness of cults and coercive control, especially those that operate in Australia. Ignorance of the presence of cults down under is common. It's not something I ever thought I had to warn my daughter about while she was growing up. However, I've come to realise it's an important issue that needs to be put under the spotlight. Due to their secretive nature, it's difficult to precisely say how many cults there are. The organisation CIFS, which is short for Cult Information and Family Support, have been supporting victims and their families since the mid-1990s, and they estimate there are over 3,000 groups, and the number is rising. In the general population, I've noticed that people generally fall into two categories. One being people who have no clue about the existence of cults, let alone the extent of harm and damage cults can cause. Or at the other extreme are those who are so devastated by the impact of cultic behaviour that they cannot bring themselves to talk about it. Stigmatisation and careless comments about victims being weak and uneducated don't help the situation. The group of individuals that sit in the middle between these two extremes is relatively small, and the number of people who are willing and able to speak up is even smaller. That's why I'm speaking out. There is a real need for greater awareness of cults and coercive control. While raising my daughter, I wanted her to feel safe and free to explore who she wanted to be. However, I didn't realise that my own naivety about cults left her vulnerable to the manipulation tactics these groups use to exploit unsuspecting victims. David McKay brazenly admits he is a high-demand group and in true Orwellian style calls himself Big Brother.
Hello, I'm Brother Dave.
So in order to help prevent other families from going through the same thing, in this video, I'm going to do an overview of both homegrown and imported cults in Australia. I'll also explain the difference between a harmless and a harmful group. Let's dive in. International groups include Jehovah's Witnesses, which I mentioned in the intro. Then there are the obvious ones like the Family, formerly known as the Children of God. And there's Scientology, 12 Tribes, Coercion, and Province, also known as JMS, all of which have built significant followings in Australia. The Exclusive Brethren are another prominent group. They were established in Ireland, but their current world leader, Bruce Hales, lives in Sydney. QAnon, Raelians, Al-Qaeda, Islamic State, 2x2s, Hare Krishnas, 12 Tribes, Creative Alliance, National Socialist Order, Sovereign Citizens. Australia's complacency to acknowledge cults means we are fast becoming a desirable place for high-demand groups to call home. These groups leverage their global networks to recruit members and expand their influence across all major cities in Australia. Melbourne, Perth, Sydney, Hobart, Darwin, Brisbane, Canberra and Adelaide. These cults don't need to hide because Australia welcomes them with open arms. Typical abuses within these groups often follow a disturbing pattern of control and exploitation. Members are frequently subjected to isolation, both physically and emotionally, as they are cut off from family, friends, and the outside world to ensure loyalty to the group. Financial exploitation is another hallmark, with leaders demanding substantial donations unpaid labour, or the surrender of professional assets under the guise of spiritual commitment. Perhaps the most insidious is the psychological slavery enforced through fear, guilt, and indoctrination, leaving members unable to think or act independently. These tactics, combined with the charismatic authority of the leaders, creates a culture of dependency and compliance that can be incredibly difficult to escape. Australia also has its share of Islamic extremists who are linked to overseas cells and often get referred to as terrorists. However, I think it's more productive to recognise the dynamics that are at the core of such groups, which are the same as coercive control features found in other highly destructive cults. In addition to these groups, in Australia we also have our share of homegrown cults. Historically, the most notorious is the Family, led by Anne Hamilton Byrne, which was based in Melbourne. She blended elements of Christianity, Eastern mysticism, and New Age philosophies. Central to the group's beliefs was the idea that Hamilton Byrne was the reincarnation of Jesus Christ and was therefore the saviour of an impending apocalypse. The cult gained notoriety for its mistreatment of children, many of whom were illegally adopted or born to cult members and raised under harsh abusive conditions. Currently, there is a cult based in Queensland which has some similar features. They are called Divine Truth, and the leader, Alan Miller, also claims to be the reincarnation of Jesus. Then there is Universal Knowledge, led by Natasha Lavac, who intertwines New Age beliefs with apocalyptic visions and claims that she is running a legitimate personal development program. She has been exposed in Australian courts as an abusive charlatan by Carly McConkie, who has written a book called The Cult Effect. Then there's Universal Medicine, led by Serge Van Hayten, who provides esoteric healings. He has also been exposed in court proceedings, this time by a woman called Esther Rocket, who has written a book called Universal Predator. Then there are the Jesus Christians, led by David McKay, who has estranged me from my daughter with slanderous accusations of being a devil worshipper. In court proceedings, the judge declared that McKay was a malicious liar who defamed me for the sole purpose of driving a wedge between my daughter and I. You may notice from those last few examples that women confronting cult leaders is becoming a thing. And it's not just about charismatic Christians or New Age gurus. A Buddhist commune in Tasmania has also been in the media due to allegations of coercive control and isolating members under shocking circumstances. Australians going abroad to set up cults is also a thing. For example, the Gloria Vale community, which was established by Neville Cooper. Though its main base is in New Zealand, Gloria Vale was founded by an Australian, and its influence has extended to India. There is a great 3-part series about the group on ABC's iView, which I highly recommend. Other true blue dinky dye Aussie cults include Argate Ministries, Brisbane Christian Fellowship, Sydney Church of Christ, City Builders, Ideal Human Environment, Kenya Communication, St. Chapelle, and the Australian National Movement. In this video, I have mentioned about 30 groups out of over 3,000 operating on our shores. It's fair to say that in Australia, we take freedom of religion to the extreme of tolerating religious abuse. Behaviours that are outlawed in domestic and business settings, such as bullying, harassment, and arbitrary surveillance, are all given the green light when it comes to religion. And let us not forget the tax benefits. In my experience, law enforcement are powerless, and politicians simply don't care. Besides, our government was established on the oppression of blackfellas and the lower class. Or perhaps they are afraid that acknowledging coercive control in high-demand groups would mean examining its own ranks. As I said in another video, eugenics never disappeared. It just slid behind the veil of religion, in which so-called freedom of religion gives supremacists the right to discriminate against those they judge to be spiritually unfit. It's not a conspiracy theory that behind the facade of our secular government, there are agents of cults who want to control our politics. We need only look to America to see how that's likely to turn out. There are many American cults that have infiltrated Australia. But it's only when these result in police being shot that the government seems to care. The average Aussie, or 400 Kenyans, who suffer as a result of Christian extremists operating on Australian soil means nothing to our authorities. It's more than just embarrassing. So there you have it. That's a snapshot of cults operating in Australia and or by Australians. The ones mentioned here score high on my cult ranking criteria, which is based on 12 features of coercive control. The criteria I use are authoritative leadership, control over information, deception, exclusive knowledge, exploitation, the use of fear, guilt and intimidation, isolation, micromanagement of daily tasks, monitoring thoughts and or behaviours, the use of punishment and discipline, thought reform, and an us versus them mentality. What I do is I gather information on groups from media sources and first-hand witnesses. I then use this to form an opinion about the group's practices for each feature that is scored between 0 and 3. For example, if there is no control over information, then the group will get a 0. Conversely, if it restricts access, depending on how severe the measures are, it could get a 3, which indicates members are restricted to only getting information that is approved by leadership. In situations where members are confined to a location and are born into the group, like was the case with Anne Hamilton Byrne and Gloria Vale, members may not even know that there is a world that exists just meters beyond the perimeter of their compound. They are literally prisoners, both physically and psychologically. After assessing each criteria using data from multiple sources, the total of each is added up to determine an overall ranking that ranges from harmless through to harmful. If you want more details about how I form my opinions, you can check out my website, recoverfromcoercivecontrol.com. The psychological harm caused by high demand groups cannot be overstated. The topic deserves a video of its own. In order to demonstrate that destructive cults are not determined by ideology or faith, I've compiled 2 lists. One includes groups that rank 6 or higher, which is the threshold for concern. The other list details groups that are 5 or less, which can be considered safe or relatively safe. By comparing the 2 lists, it's clear that major religions like Christianity, Judaism, Islam, Buddhism, Hinduism, and New Age are not inherently harmful. And there are many religions and organisations within these categories that do not raise any concerns. However, all of these ideologies may also be used by perpetrators to cause harm. Groups in the middle, like Hillsong, demonstrate how this can be quite nuanced at times. Hillsong is an evangelical Christian church that was founded in Australia and has been the centre of controversy for a number of reasons. Individuals in the inner circle have been associated with coercive behaviours and allegedly connected to sexual abuse claims. However, most of its thousands of followers sit somewhere on the outskirts of its influence, which means the likelihood of harm is reduced. Similarly, Hare Krishna also sits somewhere in the middle. This movement is based on Hindu principles and was started in the US but has a significant presence in Australia. I've ranked them as an overall 6, mainly due to the level of isolation that some members are expected to have from the outside world. Having said that, some subgroups of Hare Krishnas are more cultic than others due to the behaviours of specific gurus. The organisation as a whole does not insist upon high levels of coercive control tactics, but acknowledges that these things do sometimes happen. So it's begun an awareness campaign to discourage this type of culture from forming. This has happened because people have been brave enough to speak out, a process which I believe needs to happen more frequently in order to keep these groups accountable and ensure the basic human needs of consciousness, belief and religion are truly upheld. The rubric I've made isn't just for faith groups either. Political parties are also renowned for using coercive control tactics. And the phenomenon of a QAnon demonstrates you don't always need a charismatic leader in order for cultic influence to thrive. And there are also businesses, in particular pyramid marketing schemes, which are sometimes accused of being cults. In order to create and promote a healthy society and prevent the harm caused by high demand groups, we need to start becoming more aware of the signs. I also want to add that coercive control really needs to be viewed as a sum of parts, not one particular behaviour. For instance, sometimes a really healthy group may rank higher in some criteria, like, say, authoritative leadership. But if most of the other features are low, then it's not an issue. A group can also rank 1 on all of the criteria, and that's usually fine too. For example, I've been involved in some groups that I'd rank as a 3 or 4, and I can fully appreciate that outsiders might view these as being a bit cultish. However, even if a group presents as a tight-knit community, that doesn't necessarily mean it's harmful. It's when there are high scores across the board and multiple people reporting the same toxic behaviours that things really need to be questioned. I'd love to hear about how these criteria relate to other people's experiences. I'm open to gathering more data about groups operating in Australia. So if you have any to share, please leave a message in the comments section or shoot an email to coercionrecovery@gmail.com. Thanks for watching. If you feel inclined, please like, subscribe and share so we can keep the conversations going. See you next time.